the starting point of the film was a YouTube clip that I was watching. It was a group of tourists sitting on an outdoor restaurant high up in the mountains in the French Alps, and they saw an avalanche start tumbling down the mountain. And what I got interested in the beginning was like the way that they were reacting towards the avalanche. In the beginning, they were like, "Wow, beautiful," and the avalanche cracks up and gets bigger, and you hear some nervous laughters. And a second later, it's total panic on this outdoor restaurant, and everybody was like running away. When you think that it's a catastrophe, it's actually the snow smoke that only reached the restaurant. So everybody has to go back and take their seats again. And it was like this nervous and embarrassed laughter when they got back to the seats. So it was this video clip was actually the starting point of it. And when I told about this video clip to a friend of mine, and I said that like I wanted to put a family out on that restaurant to be in this incident in the film, he said, "Well, what happens if the father runs away and then have to come back to face the actions that he have done towards his family?" And in that moment, I understood that this is something that we can build a feature film on and make it take place on a ski resort. And after that, I was telling this incident to different friends that I had, and there was like a couple that I know that had a similar incident that actually were having some consequences between them. And they went into a mall in Colombia, and suddenly there was like someone screaming in the mall that it's a gunman here, and they told everybody in the mall to throw themselves down on the floor. And what happens next is that my friend is throwing himself behind the counter, and his girlfriend is throwing herself in the dressing room on the floor, and she's kind of exposed. And then it turns out that there were no danger. And afterwards, when they are like walking back to the hotel, they're like, "What happened now?" And they are like going through the incident, and she is quite disappointed that he ran away from her. So they are starting to talk about it when they reach the hotel room, and my friend is like, "What do you want me to be, like an action hero or something, and protect you with my body?" And she's like, "No, but just disappointed. If we're going to die, why don't you want us to die together?" And it took almost like a half a year or something, and they had a quite big problem to get over it. So it was obvious that it was like the expectations of the gender and the expectations of the man and the woman in the roles that they play, like in a couple relationship, were highlighted. And that was also like the same thing that I was interested in Force Majeure, in the incident with the avalanche.
I can actually tell you a story because Ruben asked me if I'm a good skier at our first casting meeting, and I said, "Yeah, I'm a hell of a skier. I'm from the north of Sweden, so I ski all day." And then I got the part, and we went to France, and the first day I had to tell him, "Ruben, I'm not that good of a skier." "You're not? Oh my God!" So he sent me off to a ski teacher, and I have to train a lot.
One of the goals with the film was like to highlight the absurdity of the ski resort. And when I was traveling around in France and skiing, when I was around the 20s, we were passing by Les Arcs. That is one of the first modern ski resort that was built in France during the 40s and 50s. That was when the era of the modern ski resort started. And I mean, first of all, I was very fond of the kind of architecture that is in that kind of ski resort. It's just like a ghetto that is placed in the middle of the wild nature. And I wanted to, I mean, almost the ski resort in itself is like a metaphor, a struggle between the civilized and the uncivilized, the force of nature, and that human is trying to control the force of nature by blowing avalanches, grooming tracks in the snow, and all those lifts that are going up and down the hillsides. And so I knew there were like two different ski resorts in France that I was really inspired of when I was writing the script and thinking of the film. And one of them was Avoriaz, and the other one was Les Arcs. And Les Arcs was welcoming us and letting us shoot the film there. I think it's always a quite hard process to find the right actor, and what we do is like we are trying improvisations around the situation. So, for an example, in the moment when Thomas is supposed to start the lie and said, "I didn't run," you can't run in ski boots, and all those absurd arguments that he have to protect himself. I I I I tried this situation with a lot of different actors, and I just watch, okay, who is dealing with it in the best way, who is expressing all the things that we were talking about before, shame and guilt, and who is struggling the most to avoid losing face in front of the others. And so and so for me, the casting is a lot about me being in the scene, also playing against the actor. So I get the knowledge about the scene and trying to improve the scene when we are doing the casting, and saving things that I think that the actors are saying that I think, wow, that's a good dialogue. I will put it in the script. And yeah, and then you just compare this actor to that actor, and which one is the most makes it most painful to watch, because I really want it to be painful to watch the film, because I think those tragical moments are so close to humor, and like the long silence, the long pauses between the awkward moments and in the dialogue and stuff like that. Who is performing that and make it most strong? And I guess that when we are on the shooting, we try to have like a long time for every scene. We have one camera position each day, and we just repeat the scene over and over again. And in the end of the day, like trying to get everybody to perform the best that they have done during the day, and like almost building up energy, like in a football game. Okay, now we only have 5 takes left. Are everybody ready? Let's go. Let's perform the best that we have done this day. So I don't think I have like a special method for just casting. The casting process is just trial and error, I guess.
Actually, it was quite horrible because you are working with all these feelings on the inside, and you are so the character is so afraid of letting it out. I mean, it builds up a really good pressure inside of the character. Yeah, I'm describing this feeling as like a porridge of shame and guilt and self-doubtness and fear and so on. Well, usually when you see a man cry on film, you see this like this kind of stone face and only one tear is falling off his cheek, and then suddenly he has, I have a decision to. He goes somewhere. So we wanted to step away from that kind of poetic cry and go into the pathetic cry, and wanted to really be over the top. And we had some inspiration on YouTube called "The Worst Man Cry Ever." It's when this man loses every sense of dignity and burst out, and he's like a baby and just screaming for help.
When we started the project, I said that one of the goals with the film was to create the most spectacular avalanche scene in film history. And when you say something like that, it's quite interesting, because I think everybody that works in the film team are doing their absolutely best, because we have set the goal so high from the beginning. And since I have been skiing a lot, I have seen quite many avalanches on film, so I know we will need a really spectacular avalanche. And so it ended up that the avalanche is shot in British Columbia, and we had them build a big outdoor restaurant in a studio in Göteborg, in the city I live in, and we had a big green screen. And we were combining the avalanche from British Columbia with the visual effects, and we also had some effects that were taking place on set. And yeah, we had like 4 days of shooting that scene, and just trying to find out the most strong way of telling it. And I think that what's important with that scene is like you have the very dramatic event with the avalanche, but you also have the trivial details. So one thing that I'm really in love with is that the last dialogue sentence before the avalanche is triggered is, "Isn't there any Parmesan cheese?" And then you hear poof, and then comes the avalanche. Wow. So yeah, combining the small details with the dramatic events have been something to try to lift it up and be colorful and strong. It was a bit nerve pressing, I guess. We got to know about this road that is located in the northern part of Italy by googling worst roads in the world, and suddenly we saw like images of this serpentine road going up this steep hill in Italy, and we actually have the possibility of have the shooting there, so on set. So there was no visual effects. We were actually in that bus for 1 week, and we had this bus driver there was pretending that he was really, really bad. I mean, going close to the edge of the road and going back and forth up and down that road. And I mean, in the beginning, I think everybody were quite scared. But in the end of the week, we also got a bit, how do you say, used to it. And yeah, but the road is actually that scary that it looks in the film. It's fantastic, you know, when you go on the top of it and you just look down in the valley, and I think there's like a vertical drop or maybe 1,500 meters or something. So yeah, it was a perfect location of shooting that scene.
What I like about this movie is that it's not just a good movie and then you go home, oh, they were good, it was good acting, because it really starts discussion and it goes into people's minds, and so it will continue with it. Personally, I was very glad to play this character, because after playing a lot of like romantic, nice, good-looking, heroic guys, I was really into, on the paper, to dig into this kind of nastier character, and yeah, so I really liked, because I think usually in acting you play the better part of yourself, and now I had to dig into the worst part of myself, my worst nightmare, and it was really challenging. On the paper, I looked forward to doing that, but on set it was horrible. At sometimes many days I was after shooting. I was like, I have to go to therapy. I have to go to therapy. This.
I also read sociological investigations about. One was about airplane hijackings. And you could tell in this investigation that the frequency of divorce is extremely high after airplane hijackings. And it says something about expectations that we have on each other when it comes to a couple and how we should behave connected to gender. And when we get disappointed on each other in those situations, it feels like we have a really hard time to get over it. And the other investigation I read about was ferry catastrophes. And I was looking on the statistic from Titanic to Estonia. And you can tell that the one that dies are women and kids. And we have like the myth about Titanic that we say women and kids first into the lifeboat. But when it comes to real life, this is not what happens. The one that survives are men in a certain age. And men in a certain age actually have the ability of acting egoistic when it comes to a crisis situation. And of course, this is like disturbing facts. Also, when you compare it to the history of cinema, because the history of cinema, you have the male hero is like the most reproduced character when it comes to the history of cinema. And when you put it down to real life, men actually are the one that have the ability of abandoning people to survive themselves. And that fact actually was also something that I was very inspired of when I wanted to make the film.
I think it's funny that it brings up the subject of weakness, and I think in this society there is no place for weakness, when, especially male weakness. We are living our life in social media when we put up the best parts of ourselves, even as parents, we are playing a role of an adult. We're role models.
I have been interested in highlighting questions about the nuclear family also from a historical perspective, because if you look back in the late 1800s, then we lived our lives in large families. And when the industrial movement started, we were moving into the towns, and we moved into small apartments, and that made us cut the bands with the older generation. So suddenly we were not living with our grandparents anymore. And because we wanted to find a motivation of this new lifestyle, we invented the word nuclear family. But nowadays we are talking about the nuclear family as something that is totally fundamental when it comes to our life. We not very often see it from an historical perspective. And I think that we have to raise question about this kind of lifestyle, because the nuclear family is so much more fragile than the large families. I mean, if the father and the mother is not working probably the children are much more exposed in the nuclear family. And if you look the way that society is developing now, if you see it on Stockholm, for an example, that is the city in the world where we have most single households. So we are going from the large family to the nuclear family, and then to the single household. So people are being more and more alone in our society. So I also wanted to raise questions about this kind of lifestyle that is progressing and taking us and making us more and more alone.